I stayed in apartment 108. I had been given to two strangers, who had been given money and furniture too. I felt I fit more in with the room I slept in than the others. It made sense because it had plenty of space for me to put myself in, as the bed and dresser were out of the way. The living room was already complete, and the other bedroom was too. The two strangers I stayed with gave me clothes, but the woman also gave me food and the skill of reading. I often saw the man counting over money in the living room. I learned to watch him count from behind the corner, since it was hard to hide fast anywhere else. When I was given boredom, I went to my room and was given entertainment by the birds in the sky. It was always hard to take my eyes off of them. Sometimes I would look down to see kids playing in the park in front of the complex. They would always play when it was brightest out. I learned they'd like to eat ice cream on the hills on some days and play hit sticks on others. Whenever I got too close to the window, I would always see another kid, but it was only when I watched the birds. I never saw them with the other kids for some reason. I then began school. Everyone looked like they were having fun, giving words and hand gestures to each other. I would clutch at my elbows as I watched out of the way. A room full of new faces, but I somehow recognized some of these strangers. Not for their faces or how they dressed, even though all the students wore the same clothes. I realized halfway through that year that these were the kids who played at the park. I had once laughed with them when they discussed what happened over the weekend, but they looked at me strangely. It was weird, because that continued even after I stopped giving laughter to them. Before they sent us home, teachers required that students receive and fill out a paper. But I would always have time before I was given back to the strangers. I would always draw the birds I found it hard to take my eyes off of on the back of those papers. I had lived this cycle for a couple of years. Go to school, watch the students give, take what the teacher gives, then look out the window. I do look fondly at the days I spent with my art teacher. He was only there for 1 year, but he had taught me how to watch better. I learned to differentiate wrinkles in people's faces, like how some can be focused and not angry or politely smiling instead of being amused. Strangely enough, I had seen that same child in the window in his eyes whenever we spoke. There was a time when he smiled politely, but with angry wrinkles. It was when I told him the story about the man using my newspaper art to fuel his Lucky Strike sticks. He never said anything about it, though. When that school year had ended, the art teacher had left. I didn't see any point in giving my presents after. The year after, students had only given me questions about whether or not I would help them with their work. I was tired of being seen as something to provide answers instead of giving words like I had with my teacher. I continued making my own art in the room I slept in. Whenever I came out of the room to eat, the woman asked me why I hadn't decided to become an architect. I said I didn't want to be seen as an architect, but me. She asked what I meant by that. I told her it was straightforward. She would always ask more questions, focused eyes with irritated brows, but I learned she wouldn't be satisfied with whatever answer I would give her. Even though she said she wanted to understand, she would only get her satisfaction if I lied to her. I hadn't expected the man to react any better. When I had been folding the beak of an incompleted bird, he had barged into the room, filling it up with smoke. The bird was snatched from my hands as he turned it from side to side. I had only seen this look in his eyes when he looked at the woman, but it quickly disappeared when he addressed me. He said, "Art won't help you with paying bills or making friends. You're always in your room playing arts and crafts." He crumpled up the paper, tossing it aside as he walked away, muttering about something being a useless waste. I couldn't take my eyes off the dead thing. I started barricading myself off to keep himself from treating my art like that again. I heard the two strangers arguing outside in the living room. I didn't really care what they were saying, but the general gist was regretting making me in the first place. After the front door was slammed, The apartment gave silence. I guess someone always stopped by because I always caught the phantom of tobacco lurking around the house. Nothing was stolen, though. Sometimes a chair would be left near the balcony, a cigarette slowly fading. I would always breathe life into the dying flame. It was the only thing that would give me company, or at least remind me of a time when. Even though my body rejected the smoke, sometimes my lunch, I would always force myself to accept it. My eyes would stream water because it stunk so much. I looked through the other bedroom, which was no longer complete. The photos that I had seen the first time were gone. Some products were still there. What had caught me by surprise was the stranger looking through this room, who had the exact amount of shock as me. I wanted to greet this stranger like in school, firm eye contact and a handshake. Their eyes met mine, but as we exchanged hands, they reached with their left, while I had with my right. When I shook my head in disappointment, they shook their head in denial. I found myself confused, and so did they. I had felt seen, but I was frustrated with what I had been given. I felt like I was talking with those kids who play at the park again. What's worse was that no words were exchanged, but I was given more frustration than anyone else had given me. The more I stared at this fool, the more I realized how much of a slob they were, how disgusting they are, how lopsided they are, how imperfect they are. Yet I couldn't take my eyes off of them. I became angered at this, giving this stranger my fist. In return, I was given glass shards, blood, and a stinging hand. I spent the next few days in bed, having given myself bandaging. I had wanted to see this stranger again, for they were the only ones who would keep me company. My breath shuddered as I left the apartment for the first time in years, walking myself into the night. The cold cement embraced my feet. Makeshift rain patters below me. Street lamps bowed their heads in greetings as I walked past them. There was a lake some ways away, but the distance didn't matter, as long as I became reunited with them. I slowly descended the grassy hill, kneeling at the edge of the land. I stare into the water, the same stranger waiting for me there. My hand reaches out towards them, our hands touching, interlocking. There was a comfort that the water gave, which I lost myself in. I reached further into the water, soon becoming one with the stranger. I continued to fall deeper and deeper. I felt like I had truly found my place, sinking into a home out of the way. I saw someone look at me from the outside of the water, which made me feel the same shame as the stranger in the mirror. There was an urge to swim upwards, but I wanted to fight against this feeling. The embrace I was in then was one I felt most comfortable in. The stranger in the water held me tighter than anyone else had. But the stare of that person at the edge, watching as I fell further into the deep blue, gave me a burn that I felt like I inhaled a cigarette. My lungs flare. The stranger that held me was no longer there, though I always knew there was no one there to begin with. My vision became glass on a rainy day, but like the grass on a hot day. Everything felt light. And then I was pulled up. I coughed on my knees, feeling water leave my mouth. I continued to cough until the water was no more. That's when I stood up abruptly, given an unreadable face, mixed with every emotion cue. I had been asked by the stranger if I knew how to swim. I shook my head. We both quietly made our way towards the sidewalk, where the sun began to rise over the edge. The person pulled out a small device, pointing it at themselves in the sun. From a small slit, it was like watching a ghost hand a picture through the slip of a door, which had the stranger and the sun. I had judged them for this, for what I did not know. but I gripped my hands at my elbows to avoid reaching out. We both quietly watched the sun until it had fully stretched its weary arms, awakening from its slumber behind the distance. I think orange looks nice. I think so too. I also think a seat would be nice too. My legs are killing me. I think so too. I now live in apartment 108, drafting a gazebo for the lake in my room. I meet up with Morgan at the lake occasionally, sometimes just to watch the sunrise.